everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for my February reading wrap-up. So yes, I am going to now talk you through all the books that I read in the month of February. I will talk through my stats in an upcoming video, which should be the next one that I put up. I'm not going to go through them in rating order or anything like that. I'm literally going through them in the order in which I put them in my journal. So I do have my reading journal here to help me remember everything, but also I wanted to show you my Heartstopper little thing that I stuck in my journal. So I did participate in the Heartstopper Readathon, which was run by Just Martine, and I will link their channel in the description below so you can go and check them out and subscribe. It was a really fun readathon. You could do it either of two ways. I chose to do it via the bingo board, so all of those characters as you saw there, I had to read books to match up to some different things that corresponded to those characters. We have Tao, and for that I chose the prompt film poster and I read Death on the Nile. Then we had Glasses for Elle, and for that I chose the book Whale Rider. Then for Charlie it was his Dimples, and for that I read the book Elektra. For Tara we had Sheet Music, that was the prompt, and I read Frostheart 3 Rise of the World Eater for that one. In the middle, centre square, we had a leaf, and that represented LGBTQIA+ rep. And for that one I read Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. And then we had Nick, and that one was Bubblegum Milkshake, and for that I read half of, but I'm still counting it, A Strange Hymn. Then we have Darcy, and that is the tie-dye hoodie, and for that I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. Then we have Tori, and the prompt is Diet Lemonade, and for that I read Elektra, so that's a double up with Charlie. And then another double up for Aled, and the prompt was Microphone, and that was again That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. So that was my Heartstopper Readathon. As I said, it was a lot of fun, so thank you Just Martine for creating a really fun Heartstopper themed readathon. That's all I'm going to talk about for the Heartstopper Readathon. So let's now go through all of the books that I read. So first up we have the book Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is one of the books in her Hercule Poirot series. I know that technically this series is in an order, but I don't believe that you have to read them in order, and I'm certainly not doing so. So it's definitely out of order. This is another kind of closed circle cozy mystery. I think it's closed circle. I'm pretty sure that is when it's kind of like they all end up in the same house and it's snowing, and so it could only be the people in that house kind of thing. So this one is actually following people who end up on the same boat cruise up the Nile, and a few murders actually take place in this one, and Hercule Poirot winds up being one of the passengers, and he is trying to solve the mystery of who has done all of the killings and what was the motive why they went ahead and did it. I really enjoyed this one. I really like Agatha Christie's writing style. I think she has a really fantastic way of writing these kind of cozy mysteries. I like the character of Hercule Poirot. I have to say, I initially didn't love Hercule Poirot, and I know that people are very attached to the actor who played Hercule Poirot for a long time, whose name I have totally forgotten. Sorry about that. But I didn't particularly love his interpretation of Hercule Poirot. I found it very, I'm not sure, just very kind of, I don't know what it was specifically, but I didn't love his interpretation. But I am now reading, or have read, a few of the Hercule Poirot books, and I'm really enjoying him as a character. He is kind of a fussy character, but I think it's really well done. I did guess the killer at the end of this one, but I didn't guess it exactly, and I didn't guess exactly how it was put together. So even though I did guess who ended up being the culprit, I still enjoyed it because it wasn't exactly what I thought, and I didn't really know how they'd gotten away with it, or didn't obviously get away with it, but how they'd kind of engineered it. So yeah, I don't really have a lot more to say about this one. I gave it 7.43 on Callpile, which is the rating system that I use, which is it's actually slightly different from, because instead of logic, which is the L, I have made it into significance, which means how much am I going to kind of think about it, how much is going to stay with me, how much of an effect on me is the book going to have. But anyway, Core Pile is a rating system created by G from Book Roast, and as I always do when I talk about her rating system, I will link her channel down below. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. But anyway, on Core Pile, I gave this a 7.43 out of 10, which equates to 4 stars. So a really fun time, really enjoyed it. This was actually my in real life book club book for the months of January and February, and we ended up doing this as a book into film. So we read the book and we watched the movie. We watched the 2022 movie directed and acted in by Kenneth Branagh, which was really fantastic, incredibly well done. I recommend that as a movie as well if you are interested in watching the movie. So that was Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. The next book that I have to talk to you about today is Frostheart, Rise of the World Eater by Jamie Littler. This is the third and final book in the Frostheart trilogy. I really enjoyed this one. This is a middle grade fantasy, kind of dystopian fantasy. They are beautifully written and beautifully illustrated. I just think that Jamie Littler has such fantastic illustrations and they really add to the story. I would say this is aimed at sort of 7 and up, and I think that it would work for any child 7 and up, but it also works for adults and anyone who enjoys a really fun adventure fantasy with a little bit of dystopian thrown in. It was just so much fun. I think Jamie Littler is an excellent writer as well. He writes really fantastic, really interesting characters. They just have so much life and they just are such good characters. They're so well rounded. They really feel like real people, even when they're not people at all. I do think that this book, although it's a really fun adventure fantasy, I do think that it touches on some deeper subjects and that it really explores some nuances of what it is to be human, of how society functions, of the mistakes that people make, how people can sometimes do the right things but for the wrong reason, or can do the wrong things for the right reasons, and how it's not just a straightforward black and white, this is why I did this and this is why it's the right thing, and that there's so much nuance in people and the way that they function and the way that they choose to live their lives, how they fit in with society or don't. All of those things, I think it's really well touched on in this. I think it's really well explored within such a really fun, adventurous story. So it's not didactic for children. It's not kind of laying out, here's things you need to think about to become an adult, but I think it really does help them to explore some of those deeper concepts, which is just fantastic. Such a beautiful book. As I keep saying, thoroughly enjoyed it. So the actual story, I'm not going to talk about this specific story, but like I said, it is a fantasy dystopian. I'm not 100% sure whether it's supposed to be a future of our world after some kind of climate catastrophe that ended up with the world being covered in snow and ice, or if it is a magical fantasy land that was already covered in snow and ice. But it is certainly post some kind of fairly big event occurring that changed the world in quite a dramatic way, and it's several hundred years after that, and it is a book in which a lot of expectations and assumptions about song weavers, who are people that can sort of tap into the song of the world, and the song of the Leviathans, who are essentially giant monsters that attack humankind, and they have strongholds. The humans have strongholds all over this world. It's a very cleverly constructed world. Yeah. I ended up giving it an 8.86 on Core Pile, which is a 4.5 stars. I'm not really sure what it was exactly that meant that I gave it the 4.5 instead of the 5 stars, but I think possibly it was just that it was intended for a younger audience. So although it explores those nuances really well, it is very fast paced, and I think it would have been, if it was written for adults, I think it would have been potentially a little bit of a longer book with a little bit more nuance and exploration of the human condition thrown in. So that's kind of where I'm going with that, with the 4.5 stars. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed and highly recommend. Next up we have Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. Recently I posted my Reading Popular Romance blog, which I will link below and in the eye up above, so you can go and check that out if you haven't already. It is very long, so please get yourself a drink and a snack and get settled for quite a long one. But in this one I explored a bunch of different popular romances over the last several months. Boyfriend Material was the last book I read for that, and I did talk about that in greater depth in that video, so I would highly recommend going and checking that out, even if just for the boyfriend material part at the very end. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was fantastically written. I thought that it was really funny. I love Alexis Hall's writing style. He has such a fantastic way with words. He has such a fantastic way of writing characters. The characters themselves are very self-deprecating and very funny, which I really enjoyed. It was laugh out loud, and I very rarely literally laugh out loud when I'm reading, even when something is funny and I find it funny, but this one had me laughing out loud. While I thought this book was incredibly funny, it did also have some deeper concepts, and it did also explore some different aspects of past experiences and trauma and how that can affect how you see yourself, your self-esteem, and therefore how you interact with others and the relationship you build with others, which I thought was really well done. And it was very cleverly wound together with the humour and the banter between the characters, which I thought was incredibly well done and just added so much to the nuance of the book, which I thought was amazing and really enjoyed. So we follow two main characters. We follow Luke and we follow Oliver. Luke is the perspective character, so it's from his point of view, and he is the child of a rock star. He's an older rock star who was popular in the 70s, who had a whirlwind romance with Luke's mother, and they wrote music together, but then she fell pregnant with Luke. Luke's life is quite odd and tricky because he is the child of a well-known pop star or rock star, so all of his mistakes basically get plastered on tabloids, and you know, there's so many photos and articles about him, and he didn't deal with this very well, and he had quite a few substance abuse issues, alcohol and different things like that. So there's lots of photos of him flat on his face making a lot of errors, and then he's kind of cleaned up his act. But then one night he is leaving a party, and it's kind of another well-known party. He's leaving a party and he does fall over and fall on his face, only it's actually that he trips, but there's a photograph taken of him. It's put in the tabloids again about him being a wreck, and his employer finds out about this and basically says, you need to do something about this. This is not okay. And the thing that she suggests is you need to get into a relationship. So he comes up with the idea that he'll have a fake relationship, and then a friend of his says, well, you should be in an actual relationship with my friend Oliver. Now Luke and Oliver met in the past and they didn't get along, and Luke doesn't have a very good opinion of Oliver, but they end up deciding for various reasons it would be good for both of them to do a fake dating, and of course actual romance ensues. I've said this a few times now, I usually don't like fake dating. I think that maybe I actually am coming around to fake dating, I know. Obviously provided it's done well, like any trope, if it's done well then it's probably good. So for Call Pile, I gave this one 9, which works out to 5 stars. So yay, my first 5-star of the month. The next book that I want to talk to you about is Whale Rider by Witi Ihimaera. I very much apologise. I don't think that I said that name correctly. I have tried listening to how you say this name quite a few times, and I'm not sure that I'm getting it right, but the name and the book title will be on screen. So yeah, hopefully it's as close to correct as I can get it. Anyway, this is technically a middle grade, although it's about a young girl, but it's told from the point of view a little bit of kind of a all-powerful narrator kind of thing, but then also a little bit from her older uncle, I think. So it's a little bit of an odd structure, but anyway, it's a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. I will say that it is a book that has been adapted into a movie, and I've seen the movie a few times. This is the second time that I've read the book, but I have seen the movie more times than I've read the book, so the movie is what I remember of the story rather than the book. And the book structure I found a little bit odd, so that's the main reason why I have not given it a full 5 stars. I have given it a core pile rating of 8, which is 4.5 stars, so I definitely really enjoyed it. But anyway, this is a contemporary about Maori culture and Maori beliefs. So the story follows the chief of the Wangara tribe in New Zealand. The chief is quite an old school traditionalist in what he believes about who should be the leader of the tribe and the spiritual elder and different things like that. But he's also very involved in attempting to maintain Maori culture and beliefs throughout New Zealand. His eldest son has a daughter, and they name the daughter a name that is shortened version or a different version of their ancestor, who is the whale rider. And that name and the kind of mantle of the whale rider and the leader of the tribe is supposed to go to the firstborn sons, but the current firstborn son, has a daughter, and that's the name he gives her. And the grandfather, or the current leader, is not very happy about that. She tries to build a special relationship with her grandfather. She completely adores her grandfather, and he pretty much ignores her, certainly in terms of cultural practices. He's teaching the cultural practices to the younger members of the tribe, the younger generation, but only the boys. It's quite a short book, and I don't want to give all of the information away because spoilers, but essentially this book is about belief in this particular tribe, the Wangara tribe's beliefs in the whale rider, the ancient ancestor who travelled to New Zealand on the back of this whale and was the founder of New Zealand and this tribe. And throughout their history, the leader of the tribe is the whale rider, but the grandfather doesn't think that the girl is that because she's a girl. So it's a really interesting look at religious beliefs and cultural beliefs, and look at how they shape different peoples and different ways that they interact with the world. But it's also a really interesting look at how beliefs can be changed, and ideas about gender and positions of power can be altered and changed without actually changing the belief, without actually getting rid of the belief, which I thought was really interesting. The author has just a beautiful writing style as well. It's very poetic, and his descriptions of New Zealand, of the landscape, is just absolutely phenomenal. Really enjoyed this book. It's so beautiful. It's beautifully written. The next book that I want to talk to you about today is A Splendid Ruin by Megan Chance. This was one of my self-destruct books for last year, actually, that I gave an extension to. So I'm glad to have read this book and gotten it off the TBR. Anyway, I gave this one a 5.71 on core pile, which is 3 stars. There were definitely elements that I enjoyed of this book. I thought that it was quite a good writing style, and I thought that the way the author constructed the book was quite well done and quite clever. There's a lot of different plot points in this, a lot of different reveals, a lot of things that happen. It's quite twisty and turny and a lot of information, and I did think that the author wove that all together very well. So I do think the author is a good author. I think they have a good writing style, and quite a clever writing style, but I did think that perhaps there was a little bit too much going on in the book. There was a little too many kind of twists and turns and reveals for my taste anyway. So we follow this young woman whose name I have completely forgotten. Let's see if I can find out. May. That was her name. So it's about this young woman, May. I'm not sure exactly how old she is, whether she's sort of 18, 19 or in her very early 20s, but her mother has just died. She lived in Brooklyn with her mother. They were quite poor. And then just after her mother dies, she gets a letter from her aunt saying that, hey, come and stay with us. We're really well off and we want you to be part of our family. So she goes to stay with her aunt and her uncle and cousin, and things aren't really 100% what they seem. The aunt is apparently essentially going mad, to use the parlance of the day, and they are keeping her medicated with laudanum. The maid is giving some very cryptic messages that kind of imply that maybe things aren't quite what they seem and aren't really very safe for May. And then a bunch of different things happen, and yeah, she ends up being actually not very safe. I'm just having a look on the back to see how much information is given. Yeah, so she ends up in this situation where she is not really free, shall we say. She ends up in a not great situation, and then she's plotting her revenge on her uncle and cousin who caused this to occur. I'm not going to say any more than that because otherwise we are in spoilers. Like I said, I did think the writing style was quite good. I did think it was quite clever. It's the main character that I had some issues with. Now, I will just preface this by saying that she goes through a lot. There's a lot of things that happen to her that are pretty horrific. So it's understandable. She's gone through a lot. She's been through some trauma. She's experiencing grief. She's still experiencing all those things. But at the point where she's in this institution, she is making some decisions that I just really couldn't get behind and I found quite morally suspect. They're very, very selfish decisions. She makes them in order to make her life better, but she doesn't seem to have any thought or any compassion for the people who are in these positions that she ends up using as leverage to make her life easier. And some of those things were like other people kind of taking advantage of other people, like abusing other people and things like that, and I just thought that was not really all that good. I'm not sure exactly what she could have done to change their lives for the better, but I don't know, I just didn't like that she was using these things to further her own comfort. That's really cryptic, I know, but it's hard because of spoilers to discuss it in much more detail. It is set in San Francisco in the early 1900s. I don't really know anything about San Francisco, so I can't really talk about whether it was historically accurate or not, but it definitely felt like it had a ring of truth to it in that sense, so that was well done. Then we have the book That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. So this is the book that was chosen for Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany's Patreon book club for the month of February. Otherwise, I honestly would not have read this book if I wasn't being part of that Patreon, but I did really enjoy it. I mean, when I say really enjoy it, I gave it 5.57 in Corpile, which is 3 stars, so it was middle of the road, but I did enjoy it a lot more than I was expecting to, so that was really good. I listened to this one on audio. Overall, I did enjoy the experience of listening to it on audio, which is good because that was the only way I could find it. So this book is set in a magical land. This woman is coming back from some kind of festival and is quite drunk one night, and she hears something in the bushes or the trees nearby where she's walking in the forest, and she thinks that it is a person from her village who may have been attacked by a demon. She thinks that what she's hearing is someone who's been attacked and is in danger. So she goes to help them and to rescue them, but it turns out that it's actually a demon, and she saves the demon, kind of inadvertently, not realizing it is a demon. She goes on this quest with this demon to solve this situation, and along the way, romance between the two ensues, as you might expect. There's quite a lot of smut in this one, quite a lot of sexy times. I thought they were well written. I don't read a lot of smut, or I haven't done. I'm sort of starting to read a bit more of it nowadays. I feel like my judgment about sex in books isn't necessarily the best judge. I'm not the best judge, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was reasonably well written. It was fun. This book was basically just a campy fun time. There wasn't a lot to it. It did have the magical backstory and we did follow that, but there was a lot of time spent talking about how initially, before they started having sex, about how hot the demon was and what she wanted to do with him, even though she didn't really want to do that because he's a demon. And then once she realizes that maybe she has feelings for him, then they start having sex, and there's a lot of time spent discussing the sex, describing the sex, and all of that. Which is fine. which is perfectly acceptable. But it felt like that was more the point than the plot was, which again is fine if that's what you're after, and it was pretty much what I was expecting. But I think that I really prefer plot and character with some sex rather than sex with, oh yeah, we better have a plot. If that makes sense. So it was a good time, I had fun with it. And then the final book that I finished in the month of February, which was my favourite book of the month, is Elektra by Jennifer Saint. So this book is a Trojan War retelling. It is a feminist perspective Trojan War retelling. We follow Elektra, who is the daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. We follow Clytemnestra and we follow Cassandra. Cassandra is the daughter of Priam and Hecabe of Troy, and she's also a priestess of Apollo. So it actually is quite a big range of time. So it starts with all of the different suitors coming to marry Helen, sets up a agreement amongst all the suitors that they would come and help Menelaus, who ends up marrying Helen if anything happens. And then it follows Helen then leaving and going to Troy with Paris, and then the armies all being gathered and them heading off to Troy, and then the war in Troy and the final battle, the death of Hector and Patroclus and Achilles, and then the sack of Troy, and then the returning Greek soldiers. So that is the kind of general what we're following and what we're looking at, but it's looking at these things from the perspective of these three women. I thought that this was actually a really interesting choice of Jennifer Saint's to choose these three women. We don't follow any of the characters who had kind of a close-up view of the war, so we're not seeing the perspective of any of the male leads in the Iliad or any of the other original Trojan stories. We're really following these women and really seeing the effect of the war on these women and on the people that were left behind. It is definitely a retelling of the Trojan War, but it's more a look at Agamemnon's, the house of Atreus, and his family line and how these women are all connected to each other via Agamemnon. You'll notice that I tabbed this a lot, which I only do when I really enjoy something, because I want to remember things about it. So I have a few different colours, and one of the colours is when we get kind of a nice side of Clytemnestra. So one of the things that really happens to female characters in a lot of Greek myths, when they do something that's really terrible, they are then painted with that brush of being really terrible, of being really awful, human, very amoral at best, or at worst, really evil. And so that is the perspective you get of Clytemnestra, that she was just this horrendous woman who killed her husband, who had just returned from war, and how awful is that? It is awful, no one's pretending otherwise, but you really get to explore what happened to her and what happened to make her become someone who would want to take this revenge on her husband, who would want to do this action. But then through Elektra, who is her daughter, you really see how not just Clytemnestra's actions, but Agamemnon's actions, what he did to cause Clytemnestra to want this revenge on him, to kill him, how all of that has this trickle-down effect to give Elektra the same rage and the same wish to seek revenge. And you really see this kind of way that things that happened, you understand what happened to Clytemnestra and why she is who she is and why she does what she does, but then it doesn't forgive her either. Like, it's a really nuanced look at how different people's actions affect different people and the knock-on effects of those things. So while you see that she was made this person, she was made by the actions of her husband, but then she was consumed with this need to get revenge, and that then shaped her daughter and her son's life. It's a really interesting look at that, and I think that is, for me, what was the most interesting and the most well done. The entire thing was incredibly well done. You do get a retelling of the Trojan War, like I said, and that whole myth, particularly through Cassandra. But I really feel like Clytemnestra and the story of Agamemnon and what he did and why Clytemnestra ended up killing him was the kind of main point of the story, which was just fantastic, and it was so well written. It was so interesting to hear this perspective and see this side of the story, and it was a real look at how war affects women and how war, the toll on women, the toll on children that war takes, and how so often we focus on the actual action of the war and the fighting, but there's so much more going on, and there's so much more that is affected by war, and not just the war itself, but the people that leave, the people that have to stay, the people that lose family, all of those things. So I just think this is fantastic. I love Jennifer Saint's writing style. I think she has such a fantastic way of getting into the nitty-gritty, but still being faithful to the original text, still being faithful to the original myths. She definitely did, you can tell she did a lot of research, you can tell that she definitely looked into various different versions of these different myths and legends about these characters, and yeah, highly recommend this book. If any of the things I talked about sound great, sound like something you'd be interested in, I would definitely recommend you read this book. I ended up giving this one a 9.29 on Callpile, which is 5 stars. So as you can tell, my favourite book of the month. Absolutely amazing. Also, it doesn't hurt that it's one of the most beautiful books that I own. That is everything that I needed to talk to you about today. So let me know what you thought of my thoughts about all of the books. Have you read any of the books? If you have, please let me know what your thoughts are on them. Did you enjoy them? Did you not enjoy them? Let me know what your favourite book of February was as well. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then in honour of the fact that we have little horses up here and also the myth of the Trojan horse, please leave me a little horse emoji. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.